Greetings, digital world. Welcome back to another Spliced in Later here in the latter half of October, which means only one thing. Halloween is just around the corner. It is just over a week away from today's recording. October 30 is on a Saturday next week. Very exciting. Here in Australia, you have your mixed results. You either have people who throw Halloween parties or take their kids out trick-or-treating, aggressively so, they really embrace the Halloween spirit, or you get people like me who are worried about people coming to visit them and having to talk to humans, so you flip off all the lights and you pretend you're not at home. It doesn't matter here in Australia. Halloween, we don't celebrate it too much, but when we do celebrate it, we celebrate it good. Now, going on YouTube and going on all the other podcasts, I've seen people are devoting this month fully to Halloween by means of talking about horror movies. And that's something I really don't want to do. I have mentioned this many times on this show that horror films are not bad. I don't hate horror films for existing, but I hate when I'm watching them and I'm scared so much because I'm very easily frightened. And as discussed in many other episodes beforehand, most horror films today have devolved into cheap jump scare thrills just designed to make your adrenaline rush and use the basic sense of a scare. And these very poor, minuscule horror films, there's like 1,700 a year that get trotted out just to appease the appetites of people. But trying to watch movies, because when you're running a podcast, you do have to open your mind, you have to broaden your horizons. You can't just talk about the same superhero movies over and over again. I have been slowly delving into it all. Not too long ago, I did a special episode on horror, like my favorite horror films and what made them good and what I thought to be a good horror film. I'm not going to spend time talking about that because I've already done it. If you want to find out my more specific information about that, I believe the video is titled Get Out, but it could be another one. I don't know. I could have prepared before this episode and gone back and had a look, but I haven't. I'm 100% sure it's Get Out because I can see the poster on the YouTube vid that I was uploading, but you never know. Have a look-see anyway. It's a good little yarn about basically summing up horror films that are designed to creep you out and unnerve you and make you aware of your surroundings, make you a little bit uncomfortable, but not something that's just blah every 5 seconds just so your heart's racing. No, sir. Now, I don't want to get too much into it because I can't handle watching a whole bunch of horror films for a whole month like so many everybody else is doing. I can't handle it. So I will instead focus on a classic horror film that everybody probably knows about, probably everybody has seen, whether it's liking movies or just having to go to school. But also in the realm of seeing that movie and risking my life to see more from that world that the movie set up, I took in another movie, and I really want to talk about that one specifically, but to get to it, we've got to take a journey there. So there we go. The garbled introduction's out of the way. Let's get down to it, because once again, of course, you've clicked on the vid, you've clicked on the episode, you know that we're going to talk about this stuff. So let's just get right into talking about The Shining. Now, everybody knows about The Shining. I'm sure of it. If you haven't seen the movie, you've seen the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode where they spoof The Shining, or it's called The Shinning, as it were. Homer and his family go up to this mansion in the mountains. They're going to look after it over winter. Homer realizes there's no beer or TV in the place, and he loses his mind. He goes insane. There are ghosts in the house that tell him he's got to kill his family. They'll give him a beer if he kills his family, perhaps. Meanwhile, at the same time, Bart starts to realize, hey, he can read people's minds. He can do some strange stuff with his special power in his head called the Shinning. And what transpires is basically Homer trying to kill everybody to hilarious effects. Now, take out me saying Homer and Bart and no TV and no beer, and just add in the words Jack Torrance, Danny, The Shining, and you've basically got the exact same plot for The Shining. So if you're ever too scared to watch The Shining, you can just watch The Shinning. That's okay. That's what I did for years. I watched that and went, okay, I know what The Shining's about. I'm scared. I don't ever want to watch it. No, thank you. That's looks too much for me. And I continued on with my life very much like that. The Shining was never in my peripheral vision. I was never going to touch it. But then in the last couple years, as I've really got into movies and things, the fates have pushed me to a point where I had to watch it. It was on my 100 movies bucket list. The Shining, it was like the very second picture right at the top. So it was basically urging me that I had to see it. Furthermore, it was in the big book of 1001 movies you have to see before you die. So the general consensus seemed to be The Shining's a good movie and I should see it. So still kicking and screaming, I eventually did purchase a copy of The Shining and I sat down. And I made sure to watch it on a Sunday afternoon with the summer light right outside the window, with the blinds pulled fully back so there were no ghosts or darkness. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, perfect time to watch a horror movie. Certainly not on a Saturday night at midnight in the dark with no lights on with surround sound on your TV screen. No, my way is much better. Anyway, long story short, I will admit that The Shining is a good movie and I had a great time with it. Mainly because I was relieved that it wasn't full of jump scares. It does have its attempts at jump scares, but it's to 1980s degree jump scares. So not that it hasn't aged well, but it's not as aggressive as the jump scares we're used to this day and age. As I mentioned, watching Halloween, at the time I imagined it would have been scary for Michael Myers to jump out with his axe and scare you and then run away. But in an 80s style movie, it ends up making you giggle a bit because you can just imagine our little horror guy scampering away to hide behind a tree so nobody can see him. And that happens a lot in this. What makes The Shining a great film, and in parts due to the director Stanley Kubrick, who has directed several fantastic movies that are absolutely up there as the best films of all time and everybody should check out. Just firing off a couple, you've got A Clockwork Orange and you've got Full Metal Jacket. Great films. The Shining relies heavily much on the imagery, the things you are seeing in the movie that affects your perception, your unease, your uncomfortableness. In terms of character portrayal, it's basic stuff. Jack Nicholson is being his most Jack Nicholson-y he can possibly be. He's very over the top. He's making his funny voices, his strange mannerisms, and as he slowly descends into madness, he hovers the line between very creepy and occasionally pretty funny. He plays a character who is sort of hovering between you feel for him and also you hate him. This is a guy who seems to want to do right by his family and is making steps to improve himself, but his manner that he gives off also seems that this guy's a bit of a nasty piece of work who you probably wouldn't want to be friends with, who you would be uncomfortable if they were your husband or a little scared if they were your father. He really braces that nuts thing full on though, and it makes for a lot of fun to watch. He is really the star of our show, Jack Nicholson. Everybody around him, Shelley Duvall, Scatman Carruthers, everybody that pops up in this movie. They're all great, but they're all small. Our only other huge main character besides Jack Nicholson's Jack Torrance is his son Danny. But again, it's less to do with the kid's portrayal and more what we're told about his son. As I mentioned with the Simpsons update, Danny, or Dan, or however you want to call it, turns out when he's up there, he has the ability known as the Shining, which is the ability to, I guess it's sort of telekinesis, or the ability to see spirits or work with the dead or something like that. The Shining is like a bunch of different things, I think. It's never really pinpointed exactly what it is. I think the perfect way to explain it is The Shining is just another way of saying mutant abilities. So if you've seen the X-Men, and you've seen how each different X-Men have a different power, in this world you could argue that each one of the X-Men has a different Shining. And it's that Shining ability that really impacts how they view the world. The Shining can be really aggressive to a point where you're scared all around, or you can work with it pretty well and use it to make some pretty cool superpower adventures, however you want to do that. But it's him having that working in tangent with how Jack is descending into madness in The Shining. It's implied that this house that they're living in is this source of evil that is seeping into Jack's mind and is wanting him to put an end to The Shining itself. They want to soak up all the power that this little boy has, and as well as that, kill every single person that comes in there. It's very much left to interpretation. It never straight to the point says, this is what's happening. As I've noticed watching The Shining, there are several different versions of it. You can watch a copy of it that only goes for 92 minutes. if you're a little nervous, or you can watch one that goes for a full 2.5 hours. And each one has little bits about it that just makes it a bit of a different viewing experience and provides a little bit more information that really influences how you perceive the film, how you decide what is happening, and how you think the eventual plot's going to play out. But regardless of what version you watch, they all have one thing in common, and that is the layout of the house and the way Stanley Kubrick makes you uncomfortable watching this movie. You've probably seen all the famous images from this film, whether it's the twin girls standing in a hallway asking you to play with them, or you've got the elevator that opens and a torrent of blood comes running out. Maybe you've seen Jack Nicholson smash an axe through a door and say, "Here's Johnny." All these different things are played to very powerful effect by Kubrick in his work of, I want to say, wide shots. It's sort of like if you watched a Wes Anderson movie, but Wes Anderson lost his mind and wanted to show you horror stuff. A lot of shots you've got are straight on looks at a hallway or a door. People are standing straight on looking. They turn to the left, they turn to the right, anything like that. But the way the carpet is done with this weird triangle sense, you look at it and you feel unnerved. It is something about this house that you're looking at you know is not right. There's something evil about it, to a point where you can completely understand that this evil thing is having such an effect on Jack Nicholson, who himself is not a great guy, so is easily manipulated by everything like that. Of course, you're probably familiar with how The Shining ends, but if not, I won't spoil it for you. Suffice it to say, it is everything that it is made out to be. It might not be for everybody. I enjoy it. I don't think it's the greatest film of all time, but I love that I wasn't spooked out of my mind by jump scares and was spooked out of my mind by the imagery and the thrilling storytelling that I got. So I think if you haven't seen it, you should check it out just to see how you think. It's a good stepping stone if you do want to try horror films, but you're not sure, because there is so much of it out there, and most of it's shit. But you've got these good gems in there, and The Shining is an example. If you enjoy The Shining, there's probably a wide variety of horror films that you might actually enjoy, because it's not the basic horror that you think it is. But suffice it to say, apart from it being a good horror film, it's a good showing of Stanley Kubrick's talent, of Jack Nicholson's talent. It shows how far film has come from this Shining story, of how big strides it took in establishing film as a concept. Overall, a good film. However, what I really want to focus on specifically is a movie called Dr. Sleep, which came out last year and which you may not be familiar with. Everybody must be familiar with The Shining. Dr. Sleep, not so much. On my research for this episode, I discovered that Dr. Sleep was not nearly as well known when it came out last year as it has become this year. It has had a resurgence in streaming service and media, possibly due to the lockdown. People are discovering it and going, what? Because on the forefront, if you look at it and it says Dr. Sleep, you don't know it's a sequel to The Shining. You don't really know what it's about. There's just a picture of Ewan McGregor looking at you, looking concerned, and Rebecca Ferguson next to him in a top hat. What? Not something that's going to make you go, I have to see that. What is Dr. Sleep? But if you're searching now on streaming and you've got nothing to watch, people are discovering Dr. Sleep. And if you look further into it, it goes, the next chapter of Stephen King's The Shining. And you go, what? What is this? Let's have a look. I was aware Dr. Sleep was coming out last year, but as I've said, I've come a long way since last year. I thought it was going to be the level of horror that has become the norm for the 2010s, the 2000s. I saw the trailer. This trailer focused heavily on bangs, spooks, screaming, yelling, basic horror stuff. And I was like, no, thank you. I want to watch it because I'm intrigued to see what the next chapter of The Shining is, but I would rather eat nails than go to a cinema and have something go blah at me over and over. I had already done my quota for that year by watching It Chapter 2. That was enough for me. But I got Dr. Sleep as a gift recently, and because I refuse to not watch something if it's given to me, because if people have gone through the effort of getting me this film, they must think I will enjoy it, or I will at least appreciate it. So I watched Dr. Sleep. Dr. Sleep is a great film. If I had been aware of Dr. Sleep when I made my top 10 films last year, Dr. Sleep would be well near the top. This is the type of horror movie I like. A horror movie that's not really a horror movie. This is another example of a trailer not lying to you, but focusing on bits of the movie that is not the movie itself. I noticed watching this film, there's not a single jump scare in here. There might be a couple of startling, teeny tiny moments, but nothing to make you go, oh my god, I need to catch my breath. Dr. Sleep is more of a thriller, I would say. The only way I would say it's a horror film is because it's a sequel to a film that was clearly a horror film. So by companion piece, Dr. Sleep, I guess, is a horror film. But not really. It takes that horror film concept and it does something different with it. It's probably a thriller, if I had to describe it. Or, to be completely honest, it's essence of a superhero movie in here. There's a lot going on that reminds me of superheroes and superhero films. So if you're wary about watching Dr. Sleep because you're scared of horror films, as I am, if you like superhero films, you're probably really going to enjoy Dr. Sleep for what it is. So, that's a huge surprise of mine. Let's get down to the point. Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining, meaning that Ewan McGregor plays young Danny Torrance, who has grown up. And he's grown up scarred, damaged, obviously, from everything that he went through in The Shining, and also by having the power of The Shining, hearing people's woes, seeing dead spirits. He's called Dr. Sleep because he senses when people are about to die. And he is eventually working in a hospice. So he will show up to somebody right before they die and be with them as they go on. He's been through a lot, but he's determined to try and make something of his life. He doesn't want to become his father. Meanwhile, miles away across the world, Rebecca Ferguson, who plays Rose the Hat, is leading this weird group of carny crew people who are basically living forever. And the reason they're living forever is they track down young children who have the Shining, the gift, and they basically eat their essence in a very horrifying way. So these poor children are butchered and mutilated, and these people get to live on forever. They've set their sights on this young girl called Abra, who may be the most gifted of the Shining out of all the young kids that have had it. Definitely coping with it a lot better than young Ewan McGregor did in the original Shining. She's so powerful that she'll be a great feast to these people who obviously are running out of children to eat. So they really want to get her. And Ewan McGregor, Dan Torrance, once he finds out what's going on, he does everything he can to protect this girl. And of course, things come to a head, culminating in a climax where they do indeed have to return to the Overlook Hotel from the original Shining for a climactic throwdown, which means you get a whole bunch of the Shining Easter eggs. If you watched the Dr. Sleep just so you could get some more Shining stuff, you will be rewarded, but you do have to sit through an actual movie to get to it, because it's only really the last 10-15 minutes. Ewan McGregor is fantastic as Dan. He plays him in such a scarred, tortured soul. This is not like the Jack Nicholson where you go, I kind of get why I should feel bad for you, but you're an asshole, so I don't. With Ewan McGregor, it's like you feel for this guy completely. He makes some terrible decisions at some point at the start of the film, but even then, knowing what he's been through and seeing him try to turn his life around, you're absolutely rooting for him 100%, no matter what he does. If he wants to live a quiet life, perfect, rooting for you, 100%. If you want to go and save people, perfect, rooting for you, 100%. If you want to give up, just end your life, I don't want you to, but I support you, just so you can have rest, have a brief moment of calm. So hats off to you, McGregor. As always, he's just great in everything he's in, and he really proved it in this. Where I said The Shining, it was really just Jack Nicholson's show. Dr. Sleep, you got some great standouts. Rebecca Ferguson is very compelling as our villain, Rose the Hat. She's a built-up villain who's got depth. You sort of see there's a warmth to her for people of her own kind. She does love the people that she's chosen to be a part of her crew, and she doesn't relish catching kids and eating them. She does it out of necessity. And there's a desperation to her as she's reaching her expiry date, essentially, where she doesn't want to hurt people, but she just wants to save her own people. She gets more desperate as things go along. She gets a bit more cocky. She gets a bit more arrogant. There's a lot going on with her, which is great. And of course, Abra, who I do not know the name of the young girl who played her. I'm sure I could have looked it up, but once again, I don't prepare. She's really great. She's got this confidence and charm to her her coping with The Shining and the things that are going on around her, and her abilities get more and more powerful as she goes along. And she makes a lovely little connection with Ewan McGregor, which works so well because they're both got this gift. It's gone very different ways for either of them, but they both lean on each other when they need it, which is great. And of course, there's that father-daughter, mentor, however you want to call it, where Ewan McGregor is determined that he will protect her at all costs, which is great. Lots of action, lots of excitement. Not too much action, I should say. When I say lots of excitement, let's be fair. You have a couple of actiony moments, but this is also a talking film. There's a lot of contemplative, quiet moments. There's a lot of this, what made the first Shining good, with establishing shots as well, especially when you return to the Overlook Hotel at the end of the movie. It's a very interesting plot that you can follow completely. Unlike The Shining, you do know exactly what's going on. It's explained to you in the best of their ability, because again, The Shining is a very vague concept, but you understand it much more in here than you do in the original Shining. I would say that having watched Dr. Sleep makes me appreciate The Shining more. I like to see them together now as a package deal. If I ever do rewatch The Shining again, I immediately will jump into Dr. Sleep to complete the tale. However, I could easily go back and watch Dr. Sleep right now without watching The Shining. Another great example for this film, you don't have to watch The Shining to watch this film. You can absolutely appreciate it for what it is, and even if you sort of sense that maybe something's happening that you should possibly know from The Shining, it doesn't matter. It doesn't ruin your impact of the movie. It doesn't ruin your appreciation of the film, without a doubt. So there we go. That's my special Halloween horror episode. I probably should have waited a week and done it closer to Halloween, but I didn't. So there's that. My basic morale of today's episode is, I guess, give these things a try. I don't want to push too much because I don't want people to recommend more horror films to me. I need to approach this stuff on my own time. But I'm getting there. And hopefully people listening who are in the same boat as me will feel comfortable now that they could check out The Shining, but especially check out Dr. Sleep. The Shining is a good film. Dr. Sleep is an excellent film. Love it. 10 out of 10. All right. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. It's been a treat. I'll see you next week, closer to Halloween, when I will probably do an episode that's got nothing to do with Halloween. But that's just how I roll. But until then, I love and appreciate you all as always. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.